Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Seth Diehl, who's an account executive with Ortho Molecular Products, proudly supporting healthcare practitioners through Iowa, including myself and the exceptional team at the Integrative Health and Hormone Clinic. Seth earned both his bachelor's in biology and master's in biomedical sciences from Iowa State University. Initially unfamiliar with integrative and functional medicine, Seth quickly became an enthusiastic advocate after discovering the impactful role preventative approaches play in overall health. Today, he combines his scientific expertise with a genuine passion for wellness, providing healthcare professionals with tailored health solutions and proactive patient care strategies. Seth feels privileged to collaborate with practitioners across his home state, backed by an organization that supports the transformation of the practice of medicine alongside integrative and functional medicine providers nationwide. Love that. Love that. Welcome to the show, Seth.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So our listeners know you're not the only ortho rep I've had on the show. I had on Tom Hool, Steve Dake, Thomas Pennell in the past, and you're our newest rep, so we had to bring you on. I'd still like to hear in your words why you chose to work for Ortho. So just for the listeners, again, that's who manufactures the Your Longevity Blueprint line. So how have they continued to impress you? Kind of what makes them different, really, and what we believe is the best in supplement manufacturing? You can take that whatever direction you want to take.
Yeah, of course. You just named off some heavy hitters in the history of ortho. So hopefully I can be up to par in comparison to some of my coworkers there. But no, yeah, thank you so much for having me. And, it's actually interesting, like I had mentioned, or as you read in the bio, is initially I was pretty unfamiliar with integrative medicine, functional medicine, and especially the whole nutraceutical world. So of course, I had my scientific education, went through, learned a lot about pharmaceuticals, and saw, opportunities in industries like pharma and med device, which are, of course, good industries, but my passions really lie in preventative medicine. So a lot of that stemmed from, I know a lot of people of my generation have been inspired by people like Dr. Peter Attia, Dr. Andrew Huberman, some of those kind of big online
hmm
presences. So I had actually read Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that
Oh
one,
yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
I
Yep.
became very obsessed actually with the idea of his comparison of health span and lifespan. So, kind
Yeah.
of modern
Mhm.
medical approaches and their idea of just kind of stretching out your life. We can keep you alive for a really long time.
Even if you're
But
in a
when we
wheelchair with no memory and incontinent. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So then when
Yeah.
we look at health span, that's much more of like how long can we live and participate in our lives? It's something where my mom has put it into the terms of like how long can I pick up my grandkids and run
Mhm.
around? And so it's important to look at, again, longevity, big point of this podcast. Um, and your whole brand is look at how long can we stay healthy, have a longer health span. So as I was looking for careers in the medical sphere, I realized that the best way that I could achieve that was working with an organization like Ortho Molecular Products, which I was mostly unfamiliar with before I started interviewing and ultimately started working with the organization. So they really caught me with a couple of taglines that we truly live through. So one being, we always say because efficacy matters. And
Yes.
so, of course, at the end of the day, this is a very muddy industry. So it's hard to know what's
Mhm.
true, what's accurate, what's actually going to help patients get better, especially with a lot of the TikTok generation, the
Mhm.
Instagram. We're seeing a lot of people who are not healthcare professionals who are making a lot of claims about their
Mhm.
specific products and how they can affect patient outcomes. But you can't always trust that, and there's not always significant research backing to what these claims are
Yeah.
made, or
Yeah.
how these claims are made, excuse me.
Yeah.
But ultimately, seeing ortho and also our vision ultimately of transforming the practice of medicine. So, vision and mission statements a lot of times are just created to go on a masthead, pop on a website. It sounds really great. Like, we're going to achieve that, we're going to fix the world. And transforming the practice of medicine does sound like an incredibly lofty goal. But we're operating from the standpoint that we really do believe that the medical system is broken, that, a lot of
Mhm.
standard of care practitioners aren't bad doctors, but they're not afforded the time and the flexibility to truly listen to their patients and to improve their health outcomes in a way that someone like a Dr. Gray might be able to. So we want to help support practitioners who are trying to use this individualized and integrative approach to medicine and provide them with the highest quality products possible to support those patient outcomes. So that begins and unravels a whole raft of other options there. But ultimately, then we see that with ortho through, of course, I've mentioned the efficacy component. And so a major part of that is in therapeutic dosing. So when we're creating products, we're not looking to just add what we'll sometimes call window dressing, which is throwing in a raw material just to say, hey,
It's in there.
there's
Yeah.
a little bit of something in there, right?
Hmm.
We want to make sure that every raw material that we're introducing into a product serves a purpose and has an actual therapeutic outcome in mind on the back end. And one way that we achieve that as well is as often as possible, we will work with trademarked and patented raw materials,
Yeah,
which
go
gives the
into
ad
that. Yes, that's
yeah.
really important. Go into that. Thank you. Yeah.
And so the benefit of that is that we then have significant clinical substantiation. It's one of my favorite analogies for that is you're getting real Coca-Cola versus the RC Cola or the Shasta Cola that you might find
Hmm.
at Fairway or wherever your local grocery store is. I know you've got a wide audience, but an example of that would be, when we're sourcing our minerals, we source our minerals from Albion Labs. They have a patented process for their mineral chelation, which is ultimately, layman's terms, they are binding these minerals to amino acids to enhance their absorption. So they have this patented process that we utilize throughout our entire line with our minerals. There are other mineral chelates out there. Again, there's the RC Cola out there, but
Hmm.
we have the true Coca-Cola unrepeatable kind of formula in a lot of our products with things like that.
So if it doesn't say, well, so I guess I'm thinking to the listener, if they go to their whatever local grocery store, and that mineral product does say that it has a chelate, that doesn't mean it's this chelate, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So this is one of those examples where if they are using an Albion Labs mineral chelate, they will tell you because it's
It will say
worth
that
pointing
on the
out.
label. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Hmm. So it may say a different chelate, but it won't say where or with what process. So important to note that when they do use something like a trademarked or patented raw material, they'll always tell you. But unfortunately, they don't have to tell you, if they're using an inferior quality raw material or something of that nature.
Sure. What's another example of one of those patented?
Another one, I
Yeah,
know we're going to be talking about L-theanine later.
sure.
So an example of that is in your L-theanine product, we'll utilize a patented raw material called sun-theanine. So they are a standalone organization who has performed multiple clinical trials and collected the data to prove the effectiveness of this specific form of L-theanine.
That exact raw material. Yeah.
Hmm.
So all of our products, the Your Longevity Blueprint products, have these specific patented raw materials, essentially the best of the best. I hate saying the Pepsi version because like we're talking about pop here, but
We
but
are
that was a
talking
good
about
analogy.
health.
But I understand what you're saying. I got to go back and echo a couple things you were saying. So you were essentially saying you were following Peter Attia before you got this job. So you were already kind of thinking this direction, and this was a good fit for you. It's funny that you mentioned him because before we started recording, I was a little flustered because we're half an hour late to starting this recording because I was on a 30-minute detour from North Liberty to Cedar Rapids on a country road because there was construction. I couldn't get on the interstate. Long story short, I was behind one of those trucks that was slowly painting the white line along the side of the road, and there were cars as far as you could see ahead of me and behind me, and I was like, I am never going to get there in time. But guess who I was listening to? I was listening to The Drive. Peter
Love
T
it.
is, yeah, one of his podcasts. So, yes, I'm very familiar with him as well. And I also want to mention uh, or echo something you said because I see this all the time where on social media there are a lot of influencers. I don't want to say hawking products because there are some really good products online too, but there are a lot of inferior products with really good marketing. And I'll even get sucked into the marketing on Instagram. I'm like, oh my gosh, this product looks amazing. And then when I actually get to the label, I'm like, this is crap. Like there's nothing significant in here. And I think a lot of my patients get suckered as well. And I ask, oh, are you taking a probiotic or whatever I'm asking them, about? And they say, oh yeah, sure. I bought this off Instagram. And they show me what they got honked into, suckered into, and it's very inferior. So I think that is a good caution to note for the listeners to just be careful about influencers on social media, especially if they have no healthcare background.
Mhm.
There are celebrities selling things and yeah, all kinds of things you need to be aware of. So good
I would
points
say if
there.
I can go back to this real quick, an important thing to note as well with a lot of these influencer products, if you will, again, not to denigrate the influencers. In
Yeah,
fact, I
yeah,
actually love that it's becoming a topic of conversation.
sure.
People are talking about health. And I think
Yeah.
in terms of really good thought processes of like, how do I heal my gut? It's less so about like, how do I lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks? It's more so like, how do I heal my gut? How do I feel better? And so, even when you're getting good advice from a lot of these influencers, a big concern that we need to have is where are these products being manufactured? And so, a lot of times it's a contract manufacturer, and we're not sure whether they have the proper accreditations and certifications for good manufacturing processes. So, when you work with a manufacturer like us, where we have a lot of our competitors who have, again, these really good marketing campaigns and all these things. We're not a marketing company. We're a nutraceutical manufacturer. So we are heavily focused on good manufacturing practices. And an important thing to note on that point is that a lot of people look at this industry and say, oh, there's no regulation, there's no safety practices. When in fact, I was actually visiting our manufacturing facility here about a month ago and heard from our director of quality who had a statement that really stuck with me, which was that because we operate in this interesting space where it's dietary supplements, so it's kind of food, but it's also nutraceuticals, so it's kind of pieces of pharma, but it's not quite either. So our facility actually operates under a kind of double blanket of
Yep.
regulation
Yep.
as we follow FDA regulations for food as well
Hmm.
as FDA regulations for pharmaceuticals.
That's
So there
good.
is a heavy regulation on our manufacturing processes. And when you work with Ortho, we also have a multiple thousand square foot lab in our facility. So any raw material that is coming into our manufacturing facility to be used in our products, we vet those vendors very significantly to know that we're getting them from the highest quality sources and the cleanest sources. But then we also do all of our own in-house lab testing as well as third-party verification. So what that looks like is that comes into our facility, it goes into our lab. Every raw material and batch will be tested for identity, composition, and any contaminants. So big ones of those are heavy metals, things like lead and mercury, as well as any other sort of like bacterial issues as well. We'll take swabs, put it on agar plates, and grow them to make sure that we're not growing any sort of unexpected or unhealthy bacteria. And then once we are going through that batch process, we'll continue to test that product repeatedly after the mixing and the encapsulation process, all the way up until it ships out our doors directly to a provider. And then we continue on doing stability testing. So you would hope, again, reasons why I love working for a place like Ortho is you would hope and maybe assume that any one of these products that you see on a shelf would have an expiration date. The unfortunate reality is actually a lot of them don't have an expiration date. They have a manufactured date, which means that they can guarantee what's in the bottle is in the bottle the day that they made it. But with certain degradation, especially when we talk
Sure.
about living organisms and
Yep.
probiotics,
Yep.
as time goes on, they can't prove that there's any efficacy in that product beyond when they manufactured it. So we do this significant stability testing to be able to prove that our product will be 100% accurate to that label claim up through that date of expiration. And another note on that that's very interesting is the pharmaceutical industry actually has a 15% buffer on their label claims and expiration dates. So a pharmaceutical only has to be 85% accurate to their label claim when it expires, versus when you're working in the nutraceutical industry, you have to guarantee that full label claim at the date of expiration.
Mm, very interesting. I've toured the facility a couple times too, and I walked in and I was like, holy smokes. I mean, it sounds good. Everything you're saying is wonderful, but when you actually see it, you're like, whoa, this company really does take safety and efficacy and all this right to a whole nother level.
Mhm.
So essentially, I'm just going to summarize in layman's terms what you just said. So you're saying that Orthomolecular makes sure every single batch of any ingredient that comes into your facility, A, is what it says it is, that it hasn't been adulterated, and that it's passing the test for any contaminants. And along the way, you're testing it as it's being made. You know, if there's a product that you're putting multiple ingredients into, like along the way, you're testing it to make sure it still is what the label's going to say it is, and
Mhm.
that it's still going to carry that potency or whatnot at the time of not manufacturing, but at expiration, which honestly, for a lot of your products is up to 2 years. Sometimes it's like 6 or 9 months, but it can even be 2 years, which is amazing. So I
Absolutely.
hope I said
And
that right, but yes,
yeah, no,
yeah.
exactly. And a really important aspect of that is we are a practitioner exclusive nutraceutical manufacturer. So we only work with licensed healthcare professionals. And what that means is you, specifically being one of them, stake your name and your claim and your legitimacy as a provider
Our
on these
reputation. Yeah,
products.
yeah, yep.
100%. And so we have to make sure that not only we have patient outcomes in mind as the kind of end all be all, we want patients to get healthier. We want to transform the practice of medicine, as we've said, but we want to make sure that we're putting our providers in the best light possible. And we're making sure that anything that they're giving to their patients, they don't even have to begin to worry about contamination or poor raw material quality, anything of that nature. We want you to be able to spend your time working with your patients, getting them better, not questioning, oh, I hope that's okay for them.
Yeah, no, great. Well said. At our last team meeting, when you were with us, we had kind of talked, we went off on another tangent, just talking about how so few of the I'll just say supplement companies, um, actually are still independent. Most of them are actually owned by big pharma, which is surprising. But I can put this link in the show notes. So a few I just looked up before we recorded today. So like Pfizer owns Centrum, Emergency, and Caltrate. Bayer owns One A Day, Procter and Gamble. Well, between Procter and Gamble and Clorox and Nestle, I mean, they own whether it's Nature Made Solar, Swanson, Florigen. I mean, you can look this all up online. All these companies are owned by big pharma. So what's the significance of that to you, Seth? What do you think of that? Because
Yeah,
ortho is not. So the difference is ortho is not. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that is an incredibly significant factor in this space because ultimately, when we see a lot of our competitors going the route of being publicly traded or being purchased through private equity, that means that just by the nature of the business, your priority moves from patient outcomes to your bottom line, which is a very unfortunate reality because a lot of these manufacturers used to be huge drivers in this space that were privately owned, and there was a lot of money to be made. So they moved into that more publicly traded space. And ultimately, what that looks like as well is when you're manufacturing nutraceuticals, one of the only true ways to differentiate your product cost-wise is through cost of raw materials. So why would they pay for a cleaner, better sourced version of, say, vitamin D3 when they can save 75% using a lesser quality and cheaper form of D3 because they don't have to put that on the label. So they can sneak that right through. And the only way that they really start to manifest that and show that is when their patients stop getting better at the end. And again, that puts your providers in a bad spot. And so ultimately, again, as you had said, we are still privately owned. Our founder is still our sole owner and is our CEO to this day. So he is one of those main driving forces. As I said, every time that he speaks to the organization, we start with the vision statement. And it's because he's truly trying to live that out. And we don't have to be slaves to the bottom line. We're able to make decisions as a privately owned organization that put the practitioner and the patient
Mhm.
before our bottom line.
And I can't tell you how many times, I mean, unfortunately, but fortunately, this has happened where you can't get a raw material or you test the raw material and it's contaminated and then the product goes on back order because you're not going to sacrifice the quality of that product. You're not going to give us an inferior product. You're just going to say this is unavailable until we find a different alternative, different
Yeah.
source, whatnot. So,
And actually, when we do all of this raw material testing, if it falls outside of our acceptable levels for any sort of contaminant, we actually incinerate that raw material because we don't want to send that back to
and
the
let them sell
vendor.
it to somebody else. Yeah,
Exactly, who will
yeah.
then send that out to another manufacturer who has lower quality standards because we want to look out for the end patient, even if they're not using ortho products. We still want everyone to get better. So that's something where we'll get rid of that because we don't want that circulating back into the masses.
Good. All right. Well, with that being said, after we've established, how really, in my opinion, highly reputable Ortho is, they're the best of the best. That's why we've chose to work with you. I've learned so much from this company over the years, and I totally believe in everything you said, believe in your products. Let's go over some relatively new products. We might be repeating a little bit of this on the podcast, but I want to go over, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the newer products that we have carried. So let's start with choline support specifically. Tell us again kind of what the purpose of that product is and how yours may be different.
Yeah, great question. So it's an interesting blend, and the focus is phospholipids are the major structural component of our cell membranes and our mitochondrial membranes as well. So the example of that being choline support, phosphatidylcholine is one of those main
Hmm.
phospholipids. So with that being said, a lot of these membranes will start to decay over time. So whether that's just due to age, unfortunately, we're all getting older all of the time. So our phospholipids may be decaying due to that. But other big examples are things like oxidative stress. I'm
Hmm.
sure a lot of your Lyme patients or patients with mold exposure then also have significant phospholipid and membrane damage. So what ends up happening is when you have these damaged membranes, something called the cell danger response occurs, which is essentially cellular and membrane lockdown. So, where if you think of your mitochondrial membrane, it's this fluid, free flowing, your mitochondria are making ATP, that cellular energy currency of your body. But when this cell danger response begins, it locks down. And actually, a way to think of it is it basically has locks with its doors wide open. So you have things like oxidized lipids leaking in and out. And it ultimately, you then see activation of your immune system. So that's where you start to get constant, almost autoimmune like responses. And as that continues to happen, your mitochondria then respond by saying, oh, I need to stop. So then they create ATP even less. So that's where you start to see these manifestations of brain fog, fatigue, abdominal discomfort, all of these things, because these membranes are stuck. I mean, a good way of thinking about it is if you're in the gym and you're constantly working biceps and then you go to bed with your arms flexed, it's going to be pretty hard to straighten your arms back out the next morning. So that's sort of like what we're looking at when you have these decayed membranes on your cells and on your mitochondria kind of getting stuck. So they kind of need an oil change.
Yes. Yep. 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 And that's what choline support can do. So again, just to echo what you're saying, all of our cells are lined with this phospholipid bilayer. So 2 layers of these healthy fats, we'll just say. So sometimes, yes, because of the cell danger response, we'll just say this gets locked or stuck, and we need to change out those fats. So we can do that by supplementing with phosphatidylcholine in
Hmm.
choline support. What all, remind me, what all is in there though? There's more than phosphatidylcholine.
Yeah. So it's a mixture of phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylethanolamine, phosphatidylinositol, and phosphatidylserine. So you're really testing my
Yeah, I couldn't
pronunciation
remember all
for
those.
the,
Yeah. Which
but
differentiates it from a lot of other just phosphatidylcholine products. A lot of those are also liquid, and yours is
mhm.
powder. which is nice to add to a smoothie because it kind of gives it a little creamy, fatty texture, like adding an avocado to a smoothie. So I like
Yeah.
it. I like the choline support.
And a
So
lot of
it,
people will throw that into coffee as well, kind of like a
yep.
coffee creamer type of consistency. And you're absolutely right, actually. Talking the powder component, I think is very important because with this specific blend, we actually see over 90% bioavailability within just a few hours, which is
Wow.
significantly higher than what you'll see with a lot of these other choline support supplements throughout the rest of the industry. Not to mention a standardization of nearly 6 grams total of these four different phospholipids.
Which is high dose, yeah, compared to a
hmm
lot of what else is available on the market. Great. Anything else we need to know about choline?
I mean, one thing that actually this is kind of a fun adjunct fact is that phosphatidylcholine actually comprises over 90% of the lipids in our intestinal mucus.
Hmm.
So this is one thing. There's about 2.5 grams standardized in this product for phosphatidylcholine specifically, and that can help with that intestinal mucosal barrier and
Yeah, I
improve
didn't
some
know
gut
that.
health as well.
Yeah. Extra bonus there. Okay. Let's next go to L-theanine. You kind of already mentioned it. My listeners know I love L-theanine. I take a lot of this.
Me too.
But
Me too.
but tell me what L-theanine is, what its purpose is, and yeah.
Yeah, so L-theanine or theanine specifically is a naturally occurring amino acid. And it's had a lot of significance historically because one of its main natural locations is in green tea leaves. So that's why for a very long time, green tea has been seen as a very well tolerated energy boost. So actually, just to kind of hop off of that, L-theanine is great in combination with caffeine because it helps to reduce that jittery,
Mm.
kind of really excited caffeine boost that you get and gives you an even more relaxed energy boost without the jitters.
Yep. So it actually helps with GABA, which is the most calming neurotransmitter. And so I take this before public speaking, before a podcast, whenever I feel just amped up. You can take it in the middle of the night to get back to sleep. Essentially, if you're anxious or wired or jittery from caffeine, it's not going to like sedate you. I never feel groggy or icky or like hungover, like from melatonin. I don't feel any of that. I just feel this kind of take me down a notch.
Yes,
A
absolutely.
healthy, feel good calm. And I feel like it helps me focus and concentrate because when your adrenaline's rushing and you're buzzed and wired, and when it takes you down a notch, I feel like it helps you hone in and focus. So, and this is safe while breastfeeding. Um,
Yes.
you can, I mean, even we've dosed this. I don't see children specifically, but I know children can take this. We carry Ortho's capsules. We also have chewable versions here too. This is just a wonderful product. Again, my listeners know it's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, like you said, extremely well tolerated across the board. You can dose throughout the day on an as needed basis. And kind of on that scientific level, what L-theanine is doing is promoting alpha brain waves. So those, like you said, are like the non-sedating but relaxing, calming, focus brain waves in comparison to those beta brain waves are like the excited, let's go,
Hmm.
we gotta move kind of brain waves,
Sure.
which are typically very overactive when you're stressed or wired or can't
Yep.
sleep. So
Yep.
gives you that wakened sense of calm while also, and we'll actually touch on this with your Neuro Support Magnesium later
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
share a commonality here,
We'll go
but
there
they
next.
actually, okay, cool. So L-theanine is actually able to bind the receptors of your excitatory neurotransmitters. So you're kind of, whoa, crazy, time to move, time to go neurotransmitters that tend to be overactive when you're anxious or stressed, while also enhancing the binding of GABA, like you said, calming neurotransmitter. So it works on both levels, actually, where it's reducing the exciting
Excitator. Yep.
drive and then increasing that calming and relaxation end of the neurotransmitters.
Which is why I love it so much. Uh, but that when you said that, that also reminds me, I've had a lot of well, high school students and also even college students who just say, I just get so nervous before tests. Like I can't focus. I get into that big room. And, this is a great product. A lot of my students have taken just to help before tests. And usually they report back, oh, thank you so much. That helped me so, focus. And I did great on my test. So just another application there. So let's go to Neuro Support Mag, another one of my new favorites I've mentioned on the podcast and even on social media. So tell me more about this newer magnesium that we're carrying.
Yes. So actually, just from the get-go, Neuro Support Magnesium and the specific form of magnesium in it, which is magnesium L-threonate, is the only form of magnesium clinically proven to increase magnesium concentration in the brain. So that's an important component. So we can go a lot of directions with that, but ultimately, I think the easiest way to think about this, I understand probably for a lot of listeners, magnesium is like, what is going on? There's so many forms of magnesium. And
I get
honestly,
asked that at least
sometimes,
once a week. Which form of magnesium do I need? I'm like, well, what's your top priority?
right.
You need them
And
all, but no, just
sometimes,
kidding.
yeah, probably to be honest, but I end up stumbling over them many times myself as well. But I think one of the easier ways to look at it is kind of brain magnesium versus body magnesium.
That's literally
So,
what I say. Yep, yep, continue.
yes.
Yeah, that's good.
So the vast majority of magnesium products out there are going to be your body magnesium. So as many of your listeners have heard, magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. Over 80% of those enzymatic reactions involve magnesium. So incredibly important for cardiac function, for muscle relaxation, all of these different things, GI regularity when it
Mhm.
comes to body magnesium. So those are things like your magnesium glycinate, your magnesium citrate, magnesium malate, things of those nature. They're going to have really strong body effects.
And we have a
However,
product called
yeah,
magnesium
sorry, go ahead.
chelate. No, well, just sorry, I gotta interrupt you, but we have a product
No,
called
you're
magnesium chelate, which is a top seller. I've taken it forever, which has the Albion Lab, amino acid chelated minerals that you referenced earlier, which is a great product for those reasons, but that's more of a body magnesium versus where you're going is this brain magnesium, this magnesium L-threonate. So yes, continue.
for sure. Yeah. So then when you're looking at those really good body magnesiums, only about 16 to 20% of that magnesium is able to cross a structure that is called the blood-brain barrier. And essentially, the blood-brain barrier sits between your central nervous system and the rest of your body to protect your brain, your spinal cord, all the components of your central nervous system from anything that might damage them. So it's a pretty thick, strong layer preventing a lot of diffusion into your brain. So when you're only seeing about 16 to 20% of these other magnesium forms making their way across, you're likely very deficient within that central nervous system of magnesium, which is why, again, very important to incorporate something like your Neuro Support Magnesium that uses this magnesium L-threonate. So this is actually another example of one of those patented raw materials that we utilize. It's a patented raw material called magtine. Very interesting because it was actually created and patented by researchers at MIT who conducted the clinical research on this product as well. So ultimately, what we see when we enhance the concentration of magnesium in our brain is kind of fairy dust exciting. It sounds like it's one of those fix-all supplements, but really, people are so deficient that you see a lot of benefit generally relatively quickly, and those benefits manifest as improved sleep quality,
Mhm.
improved memory, reduction in brain fog, as well as improved stress response too.
Yep, I totally agree. So my listeners also know I've had a rough year. Was very sleep deprived and just had a baby, and it's just been a hard year, working full time, doing podcasting, all the things. And so my sleep was depressing. My sleep score was very depressing to look at, with my Oura ring for about the first 6 months postpartum. Then it started to improve. But what I really, I guess I'll say, am going for, not that I'm a huge biohacker, but is sleep efficiency. So, even if I'm not getting the duration that I'd like, if I'm getting fewer hours, I want to make sure I'm still getting good deep and REM sleep. And I noticed immediately after starting Neuro Support Mag, though a lot of our patients feel like magnesium chelate helps them sleep. I just think this can help even better, right? So I've been taking one of each at night. You could even take two of each at night. But since taking this, I immediately noticed on my, Oura Ring tracking that my deep and REM improved. And I mean, I was sold right away. I'm like, yep, this is awesome. This is helpful for my life right now. And I woke up with a better sense of calm. So I am a huge supporter of that product.
It's funny that you mentioned the your own personal Oura Ring data because that was actually one of the research studies that these MIT researchers looked at was Oura Ring data from sleep. And
Yeah,
that's where they observed exactly as you said, increased time spent in deep and REM sleep. So important to note too, this isn't a sedative product. It's better to think of it as building blocks towards sleep. It's not going to knock you out. You could take
right.
it in the morning if you wanted to,
Yep.
especially, for those kind of brain fog and memory effects. But yeah, ultimately, what you're looking at is more refreshing sleep. So,
Yep.
not like you're going to sleep for 12 hours because it sedated you like
Mm-mm.
anesthesia. No, it's
No.
going to help you be efficient, exactly like
Yes.
you said with your sleep.
Yeah, it wasn't quite fair because my husband had better sleep scores than me, and I'm like, what's going on? But now that I am using the magnesium product, I've caught up to him, so I'm a big
Taking them
fan. And you
down.
don't have to take my word for it. MIT researchers say the same, apparently. So, okay. Let's go on to another new product, Inositol. I have been hoping for years you guys would come out with an Inositol product, specifically because I have patients with PCOS, and we didn't, I had to get an Inositol product for them elsewhere. And so now we have a new product, like very new, called Inositol Complex. So tell us how this product is different than other Inositol products on the market, and tell us why it's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually appreciate you making the statement about us not having one and now having one because it's a good example of how we work as an organization where and inositol is not a trend, so I don't mean to demean inositol as a trend, but we tend to be more conservative when it comes to releasing new products because
Sure.
we want to make sure that there's human clinical efficacy with our products and that we're creating a comprehensive blend to address certain issues with patients. So we didn't want to just pop out and, oh, we have an Ositol 2 product, which was frustrating to some of our practitioners because they would have liked a high quality inositol kind of complex. But as time went on, especially with this formulation, like you said, being a little bit more directed toward women with PCOS, we were able to address PCOS from kind of what we call the three legs of the stool, if you will, which are metabolic, hormone, and gut health. So as time went on, we were able to formulate this product, and now, yes, very new inositol complex product, which we're very excited about. But took us a minute to make sure that we were creating the most therapeutic product that we could. So
Yeah, go back to
um,
those three legs of the stool and the
yeah,
ingredients.
yeah, yeah. So basically, again, we look at metabolism, hormones, and gut health, especially when we're talking about PCOS. There tends to be a huge fun or focus on hormones, but there's actually other contributing factors that are able to manifest PCOS as well. So beyond simply the endocrine dysfunction, there's certain data that has shown that GI distress and metabolic dysfunction alone are enough to begin manifesting PCOS symptoms, which is why, as I'm sure you've seen, Dr. Gray, in your practice, more and more women are presenting with PCOS and PCOS symptoms, and it's happening while they're younger and healthier as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we found it to be very important to kind of focus on these different areas because then they all kind of synergistically support one another as well. So just kind of from the top, from the inositol standpoint, like you had mentioned. So we incorporate, sorry to be in the scientific weeds, a 40-to-1 ratio of myo-inositol to dechiro-inositol. All you really need to remember from that is that it is the most therapeutic ratio and it actually mimics our body's natural ratio of inositol. So that's one of those who would have guessed that, our body's natural ratio is also then the most therapeutic that we can find. But this inositol blend is shown to improve insulin sensitivity as well as hormone balance. So one research study that I will point out is this exact inositol blend was actually used in a study directly versus metformin. And what they observed was that they had nearly identical effect to the metformin in regulating menstrual cycles while also regulating FSH And ultimately, what they saw were the lack of side effects that are typically associated
Hmm.
with metformin, like the B vitamin depletion problems, but actually then an increase in fertility as well. So all of that just from that inositol blend, which then we incorporate some other raw materials in there as well. So
That's
really
amazing. Yeah,
interesting
that's
direct
awesome.
research there. Another kind of, I'll say, superstar raw material that we're very excited about. We have a new exclusive partnership actually with raw material called Solnol, which is a resistant potato starch. So I'm new to the functional medicine realm in general, and I was very new to the idea of a resistant potato starch. But this is a very exciting raw material that serves as a prebiotic, but has also been seen to improve things like short chain fatty acid production, and actually was seen in research to increase akkermansia levels by up to 238%. So that being the kind of new frontier of microbiome research, that bacterial strain assisting in mucin production and also assisting in the production of GLP-1. So there's a lot of cool things happening
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that resistant potato starch. And then we also incorporate three minerals, which are chromium, zinc, and copper. So chromium is essential again for that glucose regulation and insulin activity, and then zinc and copper being essential minerals working together to support your hormone function as well as immune and metabolic function too.
Awesome. And this is something that's taken just daily, right?
Hmm.
I mean, okay,
Yep.
just confirming. Yep, I'm still new to it, but excited to use this complex. Very good overview. Thank you for that. Okay, so that's more for the PCOS patients, but on the flip side, for more patients who are entering menopause who maybe don't want hormone replacement therapy, who are starting to get some symptoms, we have another new product. We've carried herbs for years, but we have a newer product called Estro Support that actually has rhubarb in it, which we haven't carried before. So expand
Hmm.
on that, how that product works.
Yeah, so it's super interesting. And again, with me being kind of newer to the functional side of medicine, sometimes I listen to myself talking about this specifically, and I'm like, do I sound crazy to people?
You sound
Because
great. You're
I'm
speaking very well.
saying,
Yeah, yeah,
because I'm saying, you got to take this rhubarb and it'll fix your menopause. It's awesome. But actually, this specific Rapontic rhubarb extract is what it is. And it technically acts as a SERM. So that is, again, sorry to be way too sciencey, but
No,
it's
we
a
need to hear this. This is good.
it's a selective estrogen receptor modulator is a SERM. So it actually, essentially what we're looking at is this rhubarb acts as estrogen binding specifically to one estrogen receptor, which is the beta estrogen receptor. So again, we're kind of at the high sciencey component of this, but ultimately we want to bind to that receptor because it helps to modulate and reduce the activation of other estrogen receptors that are typically associated with the unwanted effects of high estrogen as well as the unwanted effects of menopause. So things like cellular proliferation, so tissue growth in places that we don't want, unwanted hair growth, things of that nature.
Yeah, and there are drugs that are SERMs, right? But this is a
Hmm.
supplement that is acting as a SERM. So again, just to reiterate that to the listeners, this isn't binding to estrogen receptor alpha, which is not what we want. We want it to bind to beta. So it's very selective. It's not going to really raise estrogen levels, but it's going to help with, I don't have the little handout on it today, but help remind me with hot flashes, vaginal dryness, mood, sleep. What are all
Yeah.
those the other main benefits?
So actually, the way that this was clinically researched was by looking at the menopause rating scale, which observes those top 11 symptoms of menopause, which you hit a lot of those high points, things like irritability, negative mood, things like vaginal dryness, as well as physical and emotional exhaustion, those top 11 symptoms. And so actually in the research studies with this estro support is over 80% of women experience significant improvement at just the 12-week mark. So just to
Hmm.
spout off a couple of numbers. So the menopause rating scale is a scale out of 44. So each of those 11 symptoms is basically given, you give a
Rated.
score
Yeah.
from 0 to 4. And so when they started this research, the baseline actually had a lot of these women were showing menopause rating scales in the mid 30s out of 44, which is very severe menopausal distress. And it reduced to just over 10 out of 44 at the 12-week mark. And it was observed ultimately at a menopause rating scale of about 5 out of 44 on average at the 24-week mark. So this is something that has substantiation not just at 3 months, but enhances to 6 months. And they actually took this research out to a year and 2 year test groups, showing consistent improvement throughout that time in that symptom management.
I'm gonna again try to reiterate what you said. I
Sure.
did just find the handout on my desk. But so at 12 weeks, I'm going to say this in percentages, but essentially the research is showing that there was, I'll just say 60 to 80% reduction in hot flushes, irritability, mood, vaginal dryness, and sleep at 12 weeks. But then at 108 weeks, I mean, really it was up to 80 to 90% reduction in all those symptoms, which is amazing. Really, truly is amazing. So, yes, I'm very excited to use this product. So, yay, happy to have that. And the dosage is just one capsule a day.
Yes.
That's how this is
And
dosed. Yep.
yeah, to go back to that therapeutic dosing commentary again, is the research was conducted on 4 milligrams of this exact raw material. And so we use four
Four
milligrams of
milligrams.
this
Yep.
exact raw material per capsule.
Wonderful. Great. Very excited to use that. Just started using it. Okay. We're going to talk about one more product we've mentioned before on the show, and it's a simple product, but it's milk thistle. So, why do we need milk thistle?
Liver detoxification. We need to take care of our liver. Our liver is in very layman's terms, the filter to basically everything in our body. And so when you're the filter, and I like to think of it almost as like a mesh screen where it's catching a lot of the bad stuff that you don't want recirculated throughout your body. But as time goes on, if you haven't properly detoxed your liver, or if you eat a very high toxic processed food kind of diet, that mesh screen is going to get full, and that's going to back you up. You're going to get filled with toxins, so your liver needs a little help. And so that's where something like milk thistle comes in, to help detoxify your liver. Specifically, it helps to bind to liver cells to help prevent oxidative stress, but it also then prevents depletion of glutathione, which you've talked about, I'm sure, ad nauseum
Hmm.
throughout your podcast. But glutathione being essentially we refer to as our body's master antioxidant that helps to reduce a lot of that oxidative stress. So if we're able to support that glutathione level, reduce it depleting, then it's going to be able to stay out there kind of fighting that good fight and breaking down some of those reactive oxygen species, free radicals.
Awesome. And let's face it, we all have exposure to toxic chemicals. We actually have a new environmental toxin test. We've always tested for environmental toxins here, but we have a new one. So if any patients are interested in seeing their toxic burden, we can certainly test you. But milk thistle, I use a lot of. It's cheap. It's very helpful. It's in probably every liver detox program you're going to find online, whatnot. It's in Ortho's liver detox program. It's usually very well tolerated, and it's also my first line go-to when I see just minor elevations in liver function tests on a comprehensive or a complete metabolic panel. So if I see AST, ALT just kind of creeping up, usually we'll dose them with milk thistle, and in a few months they have normalized, which is great, helpful, cheap. Yes. So we use a lot of milk thistle here. We like that. Any other products we should mention? Any other of your favorites, or did we hit the top new ones?
Ooh, I mean, hit a lot of the top new ones. I suppose one thing I'll mention too on your choline support, I one thing that is fantastic about that is that when we talk about my favorite products, like Thomas said, I don't know if some of your listeners can remember back, maybe it was like 100 episodes ago or something. But if some of your listeners remember back, he made a comment that I totally agree with, which is if you ask any ortho rep what their favorite product is, it will almost always be mitochondrial complex.
Hmm.
And so when we talk about choline support, that pairs incredibly well with mitochondrial complex. So you're looking at that choline support as helping to clean up that membrane, prevent
Hmm.
some of that permeability issue, working on, say, the outside of your mitochondria. And then you have
Sure.
mitochondrial complex that comes in and works on the inside of your mitochondria to help support that health through all the avenues that you've touched on throughout a lot of different episodes and in your very good ads, I must add. So that's one of my favorites and pairs well with that one that we were talking about there.
Great advice. Great advice. Anything else you want to share today about ortho or your current position? Any other pearls, things you've learned lately?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think of things that I've learned recently.
I'm sure
Um,
I'm sure every day you're just inundated.
Yeah, it's drinking from a fire hose. That's for sure. And in this kind of functional world, there's so much information. It's kind of like where we started in this conversation is there's so much information out there. It's very difficult to sift through what the good information is. So
That's why we work with
luckily,
you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I have the benefit of we have in-house clinicians that help to train us on some of the use cases and clinical applications for our products. We have incredibly intelligent people in our R&D department helping to create new products and things of that nature, but it's still kind of difficult even for someone in this industry. So that's why I would implore anybody listening, if you're able to, talk to Dr. Gray. But if you're not in the area, please talk with your functional provider, a healthcare professional about products like these, about
Hmm.
supplementation, about your health. Because again, it can be scary to be like, oh, I don't know if I can trust this guy who looks really healthy online, but he's not a licensed healthcare professional. So please, I implore you, talk to your licensed healthcare professional, talk to your provider, talk to Dr. Gray and get that good advice on how supplements like these can improve your health and what lifestyle changes you can make to improve your health as well. Because as we know, supplements, I love them. It's what I do every day. They're a tool in a toolbox.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you don't change your lifestyle habits, if you don't eat a high quality diet, if you don't exercise, move, get out, see the sun, these aren't going to make a huge difference and move the needle for you. But once you start to change some of those basic things, that's where you're really going to see those improved health outcomes.
Beautifully stated. Wonderful. Okay. Where can listeners find you, Seth? Are you on social media?
Oh, I am, but I
Or
don't
do
know
you
if I
want to
want
share it?
people to no. So I would say if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn if you're interested in ortho or in, getting connected maybe to a functional provider around you. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Seth Diehl. So you can locate me there if you'd like.
And lastly, what's your top longevity tip?
Yeah, I love this question. I've listened back to a few to see what people have said. And like I've said a couple of times throughout this episode, is I am newer to the functional realm, to the integrative medicine, to the longevity realm. So I know that it can be very daunting when you really start to think of your health. So my one tip would be to take things one step at a time because it's very easy to listen to a conversation like this and then be like, oh my gosh, I have to do so many things. I need to change everything right now. But one example is like just dietarily, say, and I really hope you're not, and I'm sorry, I'm bringing up Coca-Cola again, but if you're somebody who drinks, say, 5 Cokes a day, that's terrible. I would implore you to not do that. But it's hard to change habits like that. So maybe this week we shoot for 4 a day, and then maybe the next week we shoot for 3 a day. And we do things in gradual and maintainable steps. Because again, it's easy to look at this and think this is way too daunting, and then you just never change anything at all. So my one longevity tip would be to take things one step at a time and just make conscious decisions every day to improve your health.
You're right. Small changes can provide big results, and nobody has said that out of 200 plus episodes. No one said that. So that was a unique longevity tip. Well, thank you, Seth. Thanks for coming on the show and reminding us that efficacy does matter, therapeutic dosing, patented raw materials, right? All these things are so important. That's why we appreciate you, we appreciate Ortho, and ultimately the ability to offer your longevity blueprint products to our listeners and our patients. So this was a wonderful conversation. Thanks for coming on the
Yeah,
show.
of course. Thank you so much for having me.